Good afternoon. Thank you, everyone, for joining me today. We are doing a live at 5 with the Script Doctor. Now, originally, I had planned to have a wonderful conversation with my friend and colleague Tom Conkle, but he was just called away on an emergency. Nothing too serious, but he had to deal with that at this pressing moment, and we wish him well. I don't foresee any real complications. It was just a bad, sudden timing thing. Literally, he found out only a few minutes before we were supposed to start this show. So I apologize to everyone out there in the chat expecting to see Mr. Tom Conkle today. But we will reschedule. We will have him back to get his thoughts on some of today's subjects, including latest news with regards to the Writers Guild of America strike, and also taking a look at some of the details that the Directors Guild of America will be presenting for their negotiations in the next couple of days. Until then, I want to just say hello to everyone in the chat. We have a very generous $5 from Troy Pacelli saying, "Can't stay very long. I have an appointment, but will absolutely catch the rerun when I get home. Shared out and liked. Best to Script and Tom." Well, thank you so much for that, Troy, and I will be sure to convey that those supports to Tom. Greatly appreciated. We also have Mr. Tickletrunk and good old Tom Connors from Midnight's Edge After Dark, and Donnie Pearson joining us in the chat today. Thank you so much for being here. So one of the things I wanted to show, and bear with me because I'm not the best at this, but we're going to do what we can, and that is, let's make sure I get this. So Deadline has reported earlier this afternoon, that studios move in to suspend the TV overall deals amid the WGA strike. So as a result, that basically means that shows are at risk of not just being canceled, but possibly those in development not even being officially greenlit to go into production. This is something similar that happened in the 2007-2008 strike. And this could be very disheartening for some of the potential good shows that might be in the works that we don't yet know about. So I'll just go into a little bit of this and then provide you some commentary because I think it's quite interesting. So it has recently been updated. It says with more studios, so the writer strike is now impacting overall deals. Just days into the working stoppage, major TV studios have started sending out letters to writer-producers under overall agreements telling them that their deals are being suspended. So that's it's not necessarily a termination, but usually when studios start to do this, it typically means that suspension is probably going to be the suspension itself is actually most likely going to turn into either a broken deal or a cancellation. And I seriously doubt that there's any show creators under contract that have something stipulated in there for this eventuality. I don't think many care to even negotiate or consider such aspects, knowing that the WGA writers negotiations were due for the 2023 season. So according to this writer here, Nelly Andreeva, she has reported that no one would comment, but that she hears Warner Brothers Television, Universal Studio Group, CBS Studios, and Disney Television Studios' 20th Television, well, along with ABC Signature, are among those that have sent out such notifications, with Sony Pictures Television relaying the message in conversation with representatives of or informal emails. She hears that the letters started going out Thursday and Friday. I also heard a little bit about that, with some talent getting calls at the end of this week to be followed by formal letters Monday. HBO's notifications have also gone out in a recent update, and David Simon revealed on Twitter that he got the call about his deal being suspended after 25 years of writing television for them. As he is suspending another day on the WGA, spending and suspending, getting a little flubbered here, but that's all right. As he is spending another day on the WGA picket lines Monday, so that would be today. Additionally, Amazon Studios will start to send letters to those under overall and first look deals Monday or Tuesday. Nothing has been learned with regards to Netflix. And that is going to be the case right now. So this pretty much means that in the coming weeks, shows are going to be cleared out, as Chris Gore mentioned earlier on the Midnight's Edge in the Morning stream, which I highly recommend you go check out if you haven't. This could be part of a purge. Now, this won't just be a purge from the studio side of things. It would also be a little bit of a purge on the Writers Guild side of things, because there is some contention among some writers that find certain aspects or certain reasons to bring in unskilled writers, so to speak, in order to score points in a cultural way that has been kind of hurting the industry. There are some writer rooms that have what's called a diversity hire. Some of those writers have a great deal of potential if they are given the tools and proper mentoring to become the best, but some of them don't, and some also maybe even refuse to get some mentoring due to whatever ideology they possess. The other sad part, and one of the main key points that the Writers Guild of America is fighting for, is to have a return of some of those mentorship duties for newer writers when they're coming into writers' rooms for film and for television specifically, but not so much for film because it is a slightly different beast. But in television, when a new writer comes in, traditionally the showrunner and the writer assigned to any particular script goes on set to oversee production and get a better sense and understanding of how a television show works in practice. They're also there to solve problems if they so arise. And after production, they join in on post-production with the editing team. And they go over all the footage, they cut it together, they get their sample assembly cuts, they get their visual effects, the early stages of the visual effects composited in. And if everything looks good to go, they complete the episode in time for it to be broadcast. And if there are issues, they usually find them there. They go back, either use an insurance day or use certain writing techniques to create either voiceover or trimming episodes for time or trimming episodes for continuity, all to make sure that the final product is the best it can be given the circumstances at that time. So for the time being, this is what the WGA is trying to fight for. Now, I mentioned a little bit on my Patreon with regards to some of their demands that I have issues with, of course, AI, with, of course, having a standard large writer's room as well. And also the big contradiction of how can you argue for a pay increase and at the same time argue for pay equity, because the people that are going to be writing those checks are going to justify any type of equity as them just paying out the lowest common figure. So one of the aspects that they are pushing for, which I'm back and forth on a little bit. I think they're doing it as a negotiating tactic to try and make sure that they're able to spend time working on the episodes in production and post. And that is the assurance for a 52-week work cycle. Now, I don't think they're going to get the 52 weeks. I've looked at more details of it and got some clarification, because even some of the stuff that they put in writing is not as clear as what they're trying to negotiate. And what they're trying to negotiate is essentially a minimum of 3 weeks per episode on a show, so that the writing team involved can be part of the production up until completion and get the best version of the episode out to the public. That in itself is fine, because it still is predicated on the merit of, if you pitch a network show with a pilot, it gets picked up for the first 13, and the first 13 episodes do well, and they order the back 9, or if they end up going a little bit further with a back 11, then you've got a full season of around 26 episodes, 22 to 26 episodes. That is essentially a majority of the year, and it's a far more stable type of job than the current system that they're doing right now, where some networks and mostly cable and streaming are trying to just have the shorter seasons between 6 to 13 episodes depending on the budget or depending on the actual behavior of the studio and what they really want. And when you have a short episode window and you're also restricting the amount of time you have to work on those episodes, writer rooms end up being only a fraction, like a smaller fraction of the year, as opposed to something that's over a 6 month or 6 to 8 month period. So that is something that is of a point of contention. I still want it to be in a merit-based thing. I think they're arguing for the 52 weeks angle just to try and get the studios to agree to just the 3-week minimum. 3-week minimum would pretty much put things more in standard to how they used to be before streaming kind of became a prominent player. And I really hope that that they're able to make some more headway in that regard. So with that being said, before we get into the Directors Guild stuff, because this is going to be a short stream, ladies and gentlemen, I do have some other obligations in about 45 minutes. So this was the plan to begin with. Unfortunately, Mr. Conkle's not here, but he will be back. In the meantime, I'll be happy to answer some of your questions that we see in the chat. Just bear with me as I scroll through, because this is a little bit new for me. We have Donnie Pearson who says, Script Doctor, I still hope this strike would not affect Netflix's upcoming Power Rangers Cosmic Fury, but I stand with the WGA. Unfortunately, it will, because Netflix is one of the struck companies. So even if the members working on that show are not part of the union, which Power Rangers has been known to do, hiring people not of the union, they will not be able to proceed because Netflix is on that list of struck companies. So anything that's currently in production now, especially over at Netflix, will not be during the time of the strike. So unfortunately, if you are a Power Rangers fan, and those episodes are not completed, then you may have to wait. I don't know where they are in production for Power Rangers Cosmic Fury, but if you are a fan of that, and hopefully they will not be affected. It's all in final legs of the post-production end to be released. Let's see here. What else do we have? That's sorry, there's just a little bit of the lag on my end because I've got the live chat and this chat, but here we go. John Sapola, hope I'm saying that right. Script Doctor, hey, got a question. Does a strike affect comics at all? No, it does not. Comic books are not part of the WGA. As far as I know, they are a whole separate thing and a whole separate union. If they do have one for the comic book side of things, I believe they're 100% freelance. It's my understanding. So I don't think you'll have to worry about that. On top of that, aside from Marvel and DC, there are no other comic book entities that I know of that are fully affiliated with a studio in the same level, aside from the subsidiaries that DC and Marvel have associated with them. And as long as the studios aren't asking any comic book writers to come in and work for them, there's no real conflict of interest on the publishing side of things for comic books. Okay, so let's see. And we have Donnie Pearson says, I have binged select Super Sentai titles on Tubi. Amazing stuff. I find the Super Sentai stuff to be pretty good as well. My favorite is Gosei Sensu Dairanger. That's what they used to do the Thunder Zords for the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, if memory is serving. Strongly suggest you check that out. For now, we're going to do a quick addressing to the Directors Guild of America. So I'm going to share with you that. So this is on their website. Sadly, I'm not a member of the DGA, so I don't have access to any more further details. But we do have some interesting aspects here that's on their website that's free to the public. Primarily, one of the big negotiating points that they have that they're ready to bring to the table is about maintaining safety on sets to avoid accidents and make sure that everybody goes home safe. This has been a point of contention for a long time for a number of directors and productions to make sure that people are not injured on set for a multitude of reasons. One, of course, is the safety of the cast and crew and everyone involved. And the other part is to not delay production, because when a person is injured, that has a ripple effect that can screw up production. It might even completely end a production, depending on the severity. So they want to make sure that that is one of their key talking points. They do have a couple of questions here. So like what contracts will be negotiated? They'll be negotiating the updates to basic agreements, which is and the freelance live and tape television agreements. So these are, it's kind of par for the course. I don't foresee any conflict of interest with a majority of these. The only ones that they're looking at that are the key big issues at stake is winning strong wage increases. So that might be a point of contention with the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers. Securing the world-class pension and health plans will be probably another issue. They might be wanting to get, I think, maybe 5, 10, and 15% possible increases to those payments. I don't know the details. I'm hoping to hear back from some director friends to provide that information. They also want to update the SVOD residual program accounts for the growing global audience. So this includes streaming and secondary or tertiary markets internationally for some of the projects that they do. For those that may not know, a director of a pilot has a standard deal where if the series is picked up for a season or a set of episodes, regardless if they work on the show in the future, they will get paid a rate. Typically, it's 10 grand per episode after they've already directed the pilot. So there's a director out there, a relatively famous one for television named David Nutter. He's directed a number of pilots, mostly for Warner Brothers Television. He directed the Red Wedding episode of Game of Thrones. And he makes a lot of money directing pilots and picking what he wants to do. And most of the time he just is able to sit back and collect the $10,000 an episode checks if he so chooses. However, he's a very active director in film and television. So he doesn't, so even though he can sit back and relax on all of that money, he doesn't. He likes to keep on working and is pretty good with television actors and knows how to get a set nice and organized. The other point, of course, is improving safety on set. That's a key issue that they have, and it's one of the ones that you'll see on a bunch of videos talking about the DGA teams that they're wanting to do. And then they want to also fight to protect the role and vision of all directors, and in particular television directors. This one might be a little bit in conflict with the Writers Guild because television directors don't have as much authority or power over a show compared to a showrunner traditionally. I know the writers are happy to support directors in their vision and interpretation of their work, especially in television. But when push comes to shove, the directors are usually sidelined in favor of whatever the showrunner wants. And it usually ends up working out better that way. Only in rare cases do you have someone who is right in line with how the television show is going to be. A great example would be Jim Burrows with his relationship to Cheers. He directed most of the episodes. He was also part of the creative and writing team. So he knew what was going on. Those relationships are rare, but when they do happen, it is always a blessing to the television show. And then they also have this last one here, which I think is part of the problem, which is increasing diversity and strengthening the voice of underrepresented people throughout the industry. This feels more like a platitude instead of something that's based on merit. I think if they find the best people for the job, but they happen to fit into whatever Hollywood likes to classify as underrepresented people, that's a win, but it should not be compelled. I don't think people who maybe have a curiosity into it should be given the great responsibility of that right away. I think they should be put on a positive path to develop the skills necessary and earn it because they'll have more value. And for the skills that are learned from those people that want in the industry that fit whatever definition this will provide at that time, it'll be harder for others to argue against it or take it away because they would have proved themselves in town. And I'm all for that. I'm all for people being able to show the world what they've got and earn their accolades. So basically, just like with the WGA, the specific studio network of the WGA is negotiating with is technically just the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, same people that are negotiating sort of with the Writers Guild of America. So one of the things you have to realize is that if the directors manage to get any of the issues that they're raising in favor for them to avoid going on strike, that could open up doors for the WGA to argue for anything that might be a crossover issue. So such as increased residuals, safety on set, or like an increased voice with regards to the directors and the control of their work. Those things could open up doors for the WGA negotiating team and the WGA union captains to basically say, well, if you gave the directors this, then we know you're flexible enough to provide similar things on our end. And I think that's fair. Worst case scenario is that the Alliance of Motion Pictures and Television Producers does not strike a deal with the directors, and then we have two unions on strike at the same time, and that will be quite an issue because the negotiations for the DGA is supposed to be on the 10th of May, and the contract expires on the 1st of June. So that only gives about 3 weeks and change until they strike a deal. And there's a very strong possibility that this Writers Guild strike will also last up until that point. It seems to be that is the case. Let's see here. John Sapola said, Script Doctor, won't a settlement raise prices to the end user on everything? That is a risk. That is something that studios will definitely take advantage of, and also distribution networks. The problem being is that unless studios are able to unless studios decide to disclose the details of what they're actually making with regards to ad revenue or subscriber status on their streaming platforms, they're never going to have a great deal for themselves, unfortunately. It's going to always be close to the chest. I personally think that the streaming model as it is heavily flawed because there's no multiple avenue for revenue input. As if you've been following me for quite some time, you'll know that my stance for streaming should be basically a traditional network model with the bonus of an on-demand feature. This is a great advantage, not just to writers and studios, but to audiences as well, because you as an audience member don't have to schedule your life around a television show anymore. You can do it on demand, and you also don't have to compete with or make a decision of which time slot you want to watch something in, because you're not really going to miss it. You don't have to worry about getting a VCR or a digital recorder to record another channel because two shows that you really like are on at the same time. With the streaming on demand model, you just pick which one you want to see in order and you go that way. And what it ends up doing is it drives the competition away from time slots to now streaming services. So if you have, say, two competitors like Paramount Plus and Disney Plus, and they want to basically corner the market on subscribers and ad revenue and eyes on their shows, they're not going to be worried about when it's being released as much as they're going to be worried about how good is this show that people are willing to only subscribe to us instead of the competitor. And I think that could be really good because that can encourage studio execs to basically get their heads out of their butts and start looking and hunting for the best talent out there to write shows for their platforms. And if they put in the network model where commercial advertisement is placed within the act breaks, they can then have essentially bidding wars for advertisers. So if they know that this show, say, The Four Sixes by Taylor Sheridan, which is now in delay, but if that is released on Paramount Plus and that garners, say, 5 million viewers every time the episode is dropped, and it has an additional 6 million viewers over the course of that following month, they can take those numbers to advertisers and say, this show is very reliable. It has this many views on release and this many views over the course of its initial broadcast period. this is what we're going to charge for a commercial advertisement. And then that money can go into investing the shows, then go to residuals for writers. And they can also cover any sort of other maintenance costs that a normal subscriber rate can't cover. And in addition to it, after they run the season out, they then have the customers then have the ability to binge it afterwards without any issue as well at all as well. So you still have the binge at the end of the day or at the end of the run for the people that prefer to go that direction. But at the same time, you also have multiple weeks of broadcasting a show and also retaining the subscribers over the course of that period, in addition to an ad model. And if they adjust it appropriately in similar rates to how Peacock is doing over at Universal, they can make it very affordable for the average user to subscribe to that service with ads, and hopefully have a great show or a number of great shows as a result. Same thing applies to anything in their back catalog. They have great shows that have been off the air traditionally for a number of years that they can have on their streaming service. They can insert modern ads as commercial breaks in those shows and still generate revenue there. And any of the writers that are alive, that had worked on those shows, can still collect a fair residual payment on that show, so that they're still able to make money off their work. Yeah, that's basically it. The more money that comes in, and if it comes in through basically more viewers and advertisers, then that helps mitigate deferring the cost back onto the customer by way of subscribers. A couple of years ago, when the streaming services were just kind of starting up, the price was actually pretty modest. It was usually between like $5 and $10. Now it's getting a little pricier, into the $14 and $20 range, and it probably will keep going up if they don't adopt this model. And if it does keep going up without them adopting this model, those streaming services are most likely going to collapse in on themselves and not be profitable at all. I did hear some stories over the weekend that something like Paramount Plus might be considered abandoned by some people over there. They want to get rid of it because they don't see it as being profitable. And the best estimates to say that it could be profitable is between 2027 and maybe 2030. Which is a pretty decent projection, because if they stay the course and they know it's going to be profitable, then that's kind of a better direction than just not knowing at all. And it is most likely going to be the future, especially as internet systems are expanding ever so much with every few years. So people in, say, the Midwest of the United States that don't have a reliable internet service at this point might have that in the next 5 years, and might be able to switch on over to something that's a bit more in their control instead of traditional over-the-airways broadcasts. There's nothing, of course, guaranteed at that time, but it is a pretty likely possibility. So I just wanted to go out for that. Corey Lucas says Jesco FI-Core unions are flawed. That is not accurate at all. Unions are a good support system in regards to the entertainment industry. They're usually a pretty good support system because they allow for collective bargaining, and they also don't impede individual contracts that you negotiate as well. In fact, they're very supportive of it. And in the event that your agent or manager isn't doing their job, which has been the case from time to time, union reps at the WGA can assist and get that rectified. And the same is for vice versa. So sometimes if the WGA is unaware of something, you and your agent and manager can go to them, let them know, and then you'll have their backing and support with regards to getting your own whatever you are entitled to based on your contract. Wolverine 626 asks, Script Doctor, do you think there could ever be a first run streaming syndication series? Think Hercules, Xena, or Star Trek The Next Generation, as with traditional television? Well, that's a very good question. The model for it right now is very different, because syndication is usually done through affiliates, and affiliates are basically local broadcasters spread throughout whatever nation you are in. With a streaming service, you don't really have that option, because if the streaming service is available to you, then you're there. Perhaps there might be some sort of deal that could be done with regards to a studio and their agreements with, say, third-party streaming platforms like Tubi, and maybe even Hulu. But again, it's usually going to be in the best interest for the studio, especially the one if they own their own streaming service, to launch it on their own service first and then license it out to maybe more affordable services later to try and drive interest to their principal one. So I don't know if it'll actually go in that way. There might be a new model that's in the works that other people are considering. But for the time being, that doesn't look like it's plausible, but who knows what'll happen in the next few years, given how the internet is going to be a far more dominant means of entertainment than we even imagined for it to be today. Shanatsky, good to see you, says good writing is literally the exact opposite of equity. Writers are not equal at all. Agreed. I consider myself an okay writer at my best. And that's just me subjecting myself to my own criticisms. But that is true. The entire means of art and entertainment is to try and always get better with every work you do. And you do that by working with some of the best that also continue to grow. If you have any writers out there that feel like they know it all and they don't need to learn anything new, you're probably looking at someone that's not going to last very long in the industry. Jason Rogers asks, script, during the strike, could a non-union writer be hired on by a studio? Technically, yes. It would not be ideal for the non-union writer, nor would it be ideal for the studio because consequences will ensue. For starters, the WGA has pretty much stated publicly and in their website and in the rules that if they learn of any non-union writer or union writer striking a deal with any of the struck companies, they will be barred from joining the WGA or kicked out of the WGA. As a result, that will make it very difficult for those freelance non-union writers to work with the studios after the strike. So this is applies to anyone, whether you're a U.S. citizen or not. If you're a foreign national coming in to do some work, you are basically going to be hurting the potential future of your career, unless you're someone that just wants to get in and get out and you don't want to do this for the living of the rest of the lives, which case go for it. It won't bother me, but just be well aware that if you are a new writer and you do something of this nature, the odds of you surviving it in the way that someone like an Alex Kurtzman did is not going to be in your favor at all. You might get 1 or 2 credits, even if they're great and people really like it. You're going to have a lot of people within the union that are going to object to any sort of future work that you may get. They're going to make threats against studios. They're going to make things very difficult. They might even do lawsuits. You're probably not going to end up working again. I do know back in the 07 and 08 periods, a couple of friends that tried to do that before. They are no longer working in the industry. They have not been able to make any headway. Some of them have written short stories. Some of them have used pseudonyms to try and get back in and have failed. And these were pretty good guys, but they're very, very desperate to make money during that time. And they didn't have someone like J.J. Abrams to defend them at a point when he had significant power. And that's just the sad nature of the game. Ideally, what I would strongly recommend to any writers, whether you are union or about to be union, you can write for yourself and you can create a backlog of projects that you can pitch when the strike is over. But I would say it's kind of best just to stay out of that conflict. Don't get on the radar for someone that's going to blacklist you, essentially, because that is what they're essentially encouraging right now, is that if anyone gets wind that you're going to be essentially a scab, you will be reported and the union will use the full amount of resources behind them to make sure that you don't write again in Hollywood. So consider that. Now, that doesn't say you can't publish your own short story or book in the meantime and get some money there. You can do a comic book. You can do a children's book. Anything that has nothing to do with any of the existing struck companies, you are free to go. And if you have any questions, just go to the Writers Guild of America website. Into the contact sections, you'll see a list of names that you can email for the WGA West or East, send them a question. It might take a couple of days or weeks before you hear back, but they will let you know if there is a conflict of interest in whatever you plan to do, and go from there. Take their advice. Robert Kayak, I think the J is silent, says the WGA needs to be able to take a loss this time. The economy is shrinking, inflation is rising, and governments can only choose to increase inflation. Well, if they take a loss this time, there won't be anything for you to ever watch again, outside of maybe YouTube and independent stuff, which, listen, many of you might be very, very happy about that. But this has not really much to do with the shrinking economy. It comes down to the fact that some studios are spending recklessly. For instance, Citadel, for 6 episodes, they spent around $300 million on that. And there's a lot of producers in town that are wondering what the heck is going on over there. Rings of Power, $1 billion spent on that show. No way near are they going to get their return on this. This is really about just making sure that if they can't, that writers are getting properly compensated based on a proper model that is to the Writers Guild of America fair. I don't know what fair would be for me. I live pretty modestly. However, I do want to, buy a home and start a family. So I would need enough money to do that wherever I might live. Ideally, I don't want to be living in California. As much as I enjoy the weather out there, it is not what it was 4 years ago, which is terrible, because it was actually, I saw it between 2005, 2006-ish, up until my last visit there in 2019. I literally saw the skies get clearer in LA, which you never thought would have happened. It was going in a somewhat okay direction, but it didn't. Took a hard turn, and it's not what it was anymore. Even some of my friends that are out there have expressed disappointment at how things were. Landmark buildings are no longer around. Bars, movie theaters, shops, they're all gone as a result of the recent events, and it's tragic. But at the same time, one of the things studios have to kind of figure out is using their power to kind of curtail some of that inflation. They do have the means to do that, and they also have the means to influence the governor's office and a lot of municipalities to get a little bit more control of the situation and allow individuals and the citizens to have a bit more of a participating voice against some of the things that are causing the high rate of the cost of living in a lot of parts in California that should not be as expensive as they are. Because while the average price for a television writer can be $7,000 a week, not everyone has got the luxury to negotiate that. That week is maybe only a 6-week job on average, in which case they have to budget that until they find the next job, which could be anywhere from 6 months to 18 months to many years. That's why whenever I do talk with some people that are interested in getting into the writing profession, especially in the Hollywood, I do advise them, if they have a day job, don't quit that. Find a way to make it work with your schedule and what you need to do, and work with that way. That's what I've done for a long time, even to this day. And that's what I encourage you, until you get to that point where, going into pitch a show or what have you, you're going to be working on that show for a number of years. And only a very, very small handful of writers have that confidence. So Read by Nature is in the chat, and he says, who counts as a struck company? Is it basically any large American studios, or are there non-struck companies writers could approach? Also, could writers start pitching to Canadian studios? Okay, so first part, who counts as a struck company? Primarily the basic major studios. I have seen a couple of reports where YouTube is involved in that in some ways. I haven't gotten clarification on that yet. So that is something to think about. I believe that YouTube was put on that list because they did, for a very short time, have YouTube Red, which was technically a studio and streaming platform. If they are still on there, then that would mean they're a struck company. So if you work directly for YouTube, not having your own channel, of course, but like you work directly to make specifically YouTube content, you would be prohibited from participating for that if you are part of the union. If you are a copywriter that doesn't work in the actual entertainment industry and you're just writing, copy or basic parts for whatever production they're doing or terms of service or something like that nature, you should be otherwise fine. So it is primarily Amazon, Apple Plus, Disney, Sony, Universal, Warner Brothers Discovery, so forth. Any of their subsidiary studios, so like Legendary, any of those ones. And the struck companies are only ones that just not agreed to the terms of the WGA. There might be a couple of studios out there. I believe Tyler Perry's studio has agreed to many of the terms for the WGA, but I'm not 100% on that. I've only heard a couple of rumors of that nature. So if any of the struck companies decide to sign an agreement with the WGA, they would no longer be struck and you can go to work for them. The last part of your question, could writers start pitching to Canadian studios? They could, but there aren't really any Canadian studios. Let's just say a lot of Canadian studios that are independent still apply for government-funded grants. Those require extensive forms and are under extreme scrutiny, and majority of them don't get picked up. There is a relatively famous Canadian named Paul Gross, who has a production company up here. I believe they're still called Whizbang. I cannot remember the last time they made something up here in Canada. I'm certain they have, and if they did, it hasn't been well advertised, but it's very difficult to make something up here. A lot of the times, even stations like CTV, Bell Media, Rogers, Global, CBC, they have an aversion to writers pitching shows to them. They do prefer Canadian citizens, but at the same time, they also prefer specific types of Canadian content. And because there's no real definition of what that content is, you really can't figure out what it is they want to produce. So it's got to be, it's got to be pretty much changed. In fact, Canada did have a potential for a film industry in the 70s, but that went down the gutter. I wish I knew more details about that, but as I started learning how difficult it was just to get a real production started in Canada, I stopped caring and decided to focus on where work would be, which was in California in the United States. And ironically, if I was lucky enough to get a job, I'd end up having to fly back to Canada to work on it. So that is what it was. That Clone Geek says, Script Doctor, what would kill the unions? What would kill the unions? That'd be very difficult. Technically, what would kill the unions would be another union between the studios that had a set and reliable set of standards for talent involved, that also had a fair percentage of growth with regards to gross profit margins, not net, but gross profit margins within the studios. If that's was set in place where you knew for sure, if you got hired under this studio, this is what your rate is going to be, and what have you, make it kind of a salary type of job, that could possibly kill it. I don't think it would be successful, because one of the things that's a driving force in the entertainment industry are managers and agents, and they basically are there to, number one, get you the best deal you can, and number two, make sure you're on a good path to grow as a piece of talent meat. Essentially, it can't get more objectified than that. But you are talent meat to them. Make sure that you're more desirable and needed, so that you can garner a higher quote and price. And that is what they want to do. The unions are primarily there for protection and for bare minimums as a starting point for negotiations. So there is some synergy to it. The biggest problem with some unions in the entertainment industry, and a lot of unions outside of it, is that some of the reps don't actually represent the best interests of the employees. Some of them abuse union dues, and some of them don't even pull in proper allocations of funds for things like pension and health and whatnot. It's pretty flawed. I've been a member of a couple of different unions outside of the entertainment industry that have been absolutely fantastic, where the dues were incredibly low, but you got massive amount of value out of it. where we've never had to go on strike for anything, where if there was an issue, your union rep actually worked the job that you worked and knew the ins and outs and was able to properly help you out if you had a grievance or whatnot. Some of those models I wish were adopted in the larger unions and other parts. I've also worked for companies that didn't want a union, but they did everything in their power to make sure that their employees were well paid, safe, reliable, grew, had room to grow within the company. Yeah, like it's really just about having some good human compassion and understanding with regards to the relationship of the employer and the employee and how they both need each other. The employer takes a financial risk to hire people to create a product, and the employees work as best they can, ideally, to make sure that product succeeds and are hopefully paid appropriately given their contributions. I think that's the type of relationship you have to have. So that's my best response to that. Screenwriting Mentor says, writers have always been shafted. I'm glad the WGA is standing up. Hopefully they will get better compensation. Ideally, that again, a lot of their demands are not unreasonable, just a handful of them. Writers do get shafted a lot, mostly on the film side of things. And television, my gosh, they are the best. But before things changed in the early mid-teens, being able to guest on writers' rooms, talking to showrunners, the level of encouragement was fantastic. So many of them loved the fresh blood when I was starting out, that they're like, they just want to pass on the knowledge they had for two reasons. One, to help make their show better. Two, in the event that you yourself get a show, you would think of them if they were out of work at some point and hire them in. There was a lot of cool cooperation in those early years that I experienced. I don't know how everyone else was. We all have different experiences, of course, but I had a lot of fun with it. I was very appreciative of the people that took the time to give me advice and help me out. I was also very resentful of the people that gave me bad advice because they were vindictive people. So it is what it is there. Ginger Adventure says, why live in a place that runs out of water? Well, because you can import water and you don't have to worry about weather conditions and rain. Even though we found out over the last 25 years, studios don't mind that as much, especially when they shoot out in British Columbia and the Vancouver area where it is raining 90% of the time. So that's something to think about. Shanatsky asks, is there an easy, viewable list of struck people and companies? If you go to the WGA website, they will show you a list of all of their struck companies. There's also a couple of trades out there. I believe Variety and Deadline have listed the struck companies in play. So that's what it is at their point. If you don't know, again, just email the WGA rep for the WGA East or West, which is again found on their website, and they will let you know. We've got Elizabeth Young, who says YouTube Red folded into YouTube Premium, as far as I know. Excuse me. Yes, as far as I know, that is the case. I am not sure if they are actively trying to produce anything currently right now. A lot of the stuff I think YouTube Premium does produce in-house on YouTube is instructional and how-to videos with regards to YouTube, and maybe even some Q&As, which I don't think violates any current union rules. But yeah, it's YouTube Red was such a mistake. Saw it right from the beginning. Even when I had an opportunity to pitch to them, I said, do you believe YouTube Red will exist in 3 years? And nobody could give me an answer, in which I said, then number one, the odds of them saying no are probably going to be that's the same as anywhere else. And number two, even if they do say yes and it's a failed show on YouTube Red, that could hurt, because the only success that I know that came out of YouTube Red was Cobra Kai. And that was a miracle. It was a miracle that YouTube agreed to it. And it was a miracle that it was able to get another life on Netflix, even though I suspect their season 6, I believe that was announced, and I believe fortunately it is delayed because of this stripe. So it is what it is. Rebel Coco Dragon says, Script Doctor, can big name writers use the strike to go to another studio if they're not part of the WGA, which if Favreau leaves and goes to DC, or like another big named writer? They can't make any deals in that nature. Favreau could go to Warner Brothers for a directing gig. he can't go for a writing gig. That's just how it is right now. When the strike is over, yeah, then it's all fair game. But Favreau is part of the WGA. He is called a hyphenate. He's got multiple hats, so he's a writer, director, producer. I believe he's also an editor as well. So he cannot do much. A lot of talent out there does more than one thing. There's a lot of actor writers out there that can act, but also can't do anything writing wise. So a lot of things are frozen right now, and it's pretty static as it is. Even with Jon Favreau and his Fairview production company, that is technically part that possibly could be part of the strike system or the struck system, because I believe it might be under a contract with Disney with him as well. And so because Disney is struck, any subsidiary or contracted production entity would also fall into that for the time being. That being said, depending on if Fairview does hire writers to produce things in-house for them to pitch, if Fairview has signed a WGA agreement, then there should not be any conflict of interest there. But the problem being is that there's nothing for them to pitch to, because all the major studios are currently struck companies. Ginger Adventure says, breaking, George R.R. Martin stops working for the strike, making it his 11th year running. Well, he's also a novelist, so that's a different area altogether. I don't know what's going on there. The stuff that he is writing is for books. I do know did have 3 TV projects that he was working on, not like in name only, but like actually working on. So I don't think that could be. I don't think he's happy about that being on hold, but he's got a great reason now to go back to finishing off the books that he had promised to release. So we'll see what happens there. I'm not going to hold my breath. Corey Lucas says, need more female nude scenes like Canadian shows used to have. Maybe I can't remember many Canadian shows aside from some of the stuff that was done on like City TV back in the day. Yeah. But you know, that sex does sell. It is what it is. BG says, looks like Wig Bang's film has turned into a production company for Hollywood studios. They were working on Star Trek Discovery, Handmaid's Tale, and a few others. They're not. They're in contract with them. They're not a company for Hollywood studios. They haven't done anything individually for themselves. Basically, my understanding with them is that they facilitate connections for local crews in Canada, which is good for local crews. Happy that they're getting the work. Unfortunate for the fact that they're more of a facilitator as opposed to something that's actually able to make their own stuff. The last thing that I think they made was the Men with Brooms TV show, and that was kind of like their own thing, and that wasn't very, very good either. Corey Lucas asks, script, is every actor in Hollywood a part of SAG, or are there other acting unions for actors? Not every actor is part of SAG. It's very easy to get a SAG card, as far as I know. Just do one commercial and you've got it, and you're part of the union, and you're good to go. So if you have a gig that ever gets broadcast or distributed digitally, you are part of the union. There's also ACTRA, which is the Canadian counterpart to SAG. They too can do stuff like that, but SAG I don't think is negotiating for quite a while. So I think you got some time there. But it is coming up, if I'm not mistaken. So that is something to consider. And I'll take care of a few more questions, but then I'm going to have to actually go because I've lost focus on how much time I've been doing this. I see we've been doing this almost an hour. It's gone by very fast. So thank you so much for hanging out with me, all 85 of you. Thank you very much. Shanatsky asks a great question. Is there a way to get rid of Hollywood accounting? I wish I kind of see where you're coming from there. Having dated a Hollywood accountant many years ago, a lot of them were actually on the side of quality content and budget consciousness back in the day. The ones that would do the little fidoodling with the books, as it were, to make a successful movie appear not profitable. That always comes with issues down the road that have to be re-examined and reworked every few years to maintain that perception. So I would like a little bit more transparency with the Hollywood accounting. I'd also like a little bit more of the Hollywood accounting to pay more close attention to things. I can't go into many details, but I can just say that recently a Hollywood accountant screwed me over out of several $1 million for a project because they failed to do their due diligence and ask a question to confirm a certain perception. And because of that, a number of people lost a lot of money and a lot of work. And yes, that's not great. But I also know some that would definitely take a look at a budget for a feature film, a tentpole film over 200 million, and say this shouldn't be costing this expensive. The cost should be at least 2/3 less than that. And I would like that. I would like that type of transparency and that type of things. Christopher Dominguez. Christopher Dominguez has says, Script Doctor, could new coming screenwriters receive help from more experienced and talented screenwriters? Yeah. In fact, a lot of screenwriters like myself, we offer consulting services. So if you are a writer and you want to develop a script or get notes on your script, you can reach out to myself, or you can reach out to other screenwriters as well. They have their own packages and rates, and this does not violate the WGA rules. Because it is technically an independent business. And there are some great ones out there. Be mindful of any of the ones that try to guarantee you number one, success, because no competent writer doing these service will do that. I don't guarantee that. All I can say is that I will do my best to try and make you get the best out of your work. And from there, it is up to you to whether or not it gets sold, produced, and released. There are some that do something called pay to play. So be very mindful of that, whether it's an individual or a program of people that promise you networking with studio executives or agents or managers and, trying to get you signed with them or something of that nature. Be very, very cautious of that. Some are somewhat legitimate. Many are not. I won't say any names because I don't want to incur any sort of liability or slander. But you just be very careful with what you spend your money on and what you're actually getting out of it. Success stories from those programs are very few and far between. Even if you see a lot of them, multiply that by, say, 500 or 600, and that's how many people have gone through in that person's year. When that quote is stated to get that way, it's very, very sporadic. I do offer that. I do written notes for very cheap. I only charge $2 US per page of your script, and I'll give you written notes. And if you want to do Zoom sessions or more intensive stuff, I do have a little bit higher rates, but they get cheaper with every amount of sessions that you want to book collectively. And you also have access to me via email or Twitter DM to answer any questions in between sessions or in between your writing drafts and whatnot. And I also make sure that you back them up in certain areas so that, and because the Zoom meetings are also recorded, you are now protected with your IP so that you know that I will not be stealing it, because I actually have no interest in taking your story at all. I've got my own to worry about. But yes, I do record them. You get a copy of that recording. And so if some dubious person happens to have the exact same idea and lines of your script that's gone public, and you think it's me, well, you're more than welcome to release that video, which is proof of the theft. But I can assure you that's not the case, because that doesn't benefit me, and it definitely doesn't benefit you. Theft is very rare in Hollywood, especially of the legitimate studios, because and I'll say this as long as it still is true, studios will always make more money hiring you and buying your idea than stealing it. It's just the nature of the game, because whoever has to supplement you didn't come up with the idea, and they're not going to come up with something as good or great afterwards either. Hollywood knows this. Smart executives know this. Studio heads know this. So you're pretty much safe. Just make sure that you take your own precautions. Email copies of your draft to yourself. Mail them to yourself. Email them to other email addresses you have. You are welcome to register them with the WGA. Don't put the registration number on your script, though, when you're submitting it out there. It's very unprofessional. The reason being is that it implies that you expect the people you're sending it to that they're going to steal the script, in which case they're just going to ignore you. Because if they really like what you have, they'll do it. The other part, too, is that even if you don't put it on the script and they say do steal it, and you can prove a chain of custody, and you've also got the WGA registration number on hand, you can go to the WGA, and they will fight for you to make sure that action has not will result in either credit and or compensation or both. That is one of the things that the WGA is quite good at doing. So that's something to think about there. Let's just see here. We have Rebel Coke Dragon again. Script Doctor, would the strike have impact on anime when it comes to dub, or not much since the story is already written from a Japan studio, or would it have to be changed in any way? That depends on the dubbing company. I don't think many of them are union. I think they hire some people that just translations and copy. You can tell this because sometimes the English dubs for a lot of anime is stilted and dry and not very engaging. It's very mechanical. Sometimes, like, again, anime is a third party a medium. It's written, produced in Japan, and then exported to other countries. And if sometimes in Japan they do have, not many, of course, but sometimes they do have English or other language translations that they do record in Japan for distribution. And in other cases, they just sell it to other countries, and they take care of the dubbing and the translations themselves. Anime is not going to be impacted by this at all. Unless you've got something that is, say, a US made company that's part of a struck company that makes its own in-house anime, which I doubt they do because most of them like to outsource stuff. So it's a very complicated nature when it comes to animation, and anime as well. So it doesn't really count. The only thing you'd have to be worried about is if, in fact, some of the studios that do perform dubs also rewrite the script and maybe even re-edit the anime to fit the dub. That would be a point of contention. Shanatsky says, I'm wary of screenwriting contests. Too much hot air, very little feedback, most ties. You're not wrong there. The only screenwriting contest I think is legit would be the one from the Academy of Motion Pictures. So that's the Oscars. They have what's called the Nickel Fellowship. That is a legit one. Excuse me. That's the one I gravitate to as well. So you get a lot of due diligence on that part. You also have some other smaller production companies have writing contests and submissions for coverage. Unless they cite movies and television shows that you can find and watch either through streaming platforms or on broadcast TV or what have you, don't really trust them. Just going to put it that way. I have some I like, but at the same time have reservations about the Austin Film Festival, because it is a film festival. It does have a screenwriting program. It feels more like it's just an opportunity for people of a certain caliber of writing to network, which is a great thing to utilize, but it is rather pricey. And you also have to go to Austin. So I'll leave that up to you. I think it's an okay part of Texas, but it's not Texas. Just put it that way. There are other parts of Texas that are far more entertaining and far more authentic to the state than Austin, but Austin does have some parts to it that are quite nice, and I understand the attraction to it. Okay. All right. So that's pretty much it for me. Thank you so much. I do have to go, but I greatly appreciate you sticking with me by myself with my boring background for the past hour, all 90 of you. If you do have any questions in the future, you are more than welcome to leave a comment on this video or tweet me at ScriptDoctorPhD. I think my thing will, no, it doesn't let me do the thing. So we'll go from there. But I greatly appreciate you hanging out with me. I greatly appreciate the questions you've been giving me in the chat. I hope this has shed a little bit more light on the situation at hand. I will be around on other streams, so just follow me on Twitter at ScriptDoctorPhD to see where I will be popping up. And maybe even in the next couple days or so, I might play some Conan Exiles just to distract myself from some of the craziness that's going on with the negotiations or the strike itself. But in the meantime, please feel free to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you are a writer, aspiring writer, existing writer, just someone that needs some commentary and encouraging notes on your work, consider joining my Patreon at at patreon.com/scriptdoctor. I have a lot of affordable tiers and bonuses and discounts on screenwriting packages, and I love being available to all of you for that. It greatly will help me out during this time where I'm unable to work properly. And in the meantime, have a wonderful night, and never forget, it all starts with the script.